The state will stipulate, Your Honor.
Defense will stipulate, Your Honor.
All right, so before you begin, you may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, you're now about to hear closing arguments on behalf of the parties. The state will have the opening and first argument concerning closing argument, and then the defendant will have an opportunity to also make an argument to you, and then you will hear from the state again, perhaps. It's my understanding that you will hear from the state a second time in this particular case. Now, although the state has two arguments, both sides get the same amount of time to present their argument to you. That time is a total of 1 hour. The state gets 2 opportunities to present to you because the state does have the burden of proof in this particular trial. So we will hear from the state, we'll hear from the defense, and then most likely the state again. There may come a point in time where I have to interrupt defense counsel if timing is off a little bit. So please don't hold that against anyone. That's my call. So I hate to interrupt counsel, but I might have to. All right, we'll see how the closing arguments go, and then we'll decide what we're going to do out of the 2 on that. Thank you so much for your continued patience, as well as your attention to this particular trial. Lastly, I see a lot of you with your notebooks, and that's my bad. I should have had the clerk take them from you. I'm going to ask you not to take notes. I'm going to instruct you not to take notes during closing argument. And the reason that I do that is because closing arguments are not evidence. Number one, the attorneys say to you is not evidence. So you've heard the evidence that you're going to hear in this case. This is the opportunity for counsel to argue to you. So I won't have you take notes during this time. I would ask you just to pay attention to counsel, listen to their arguments, and then I'll have an opportunity to address you. Thank you so much. I would invite you to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I was actually just going to address that arguments are not evidence. This is argument, right? You've heard all the evidence that you need to hear. At some point in time, you're going to decide this case based on what you heard in court. But I wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for giving us your time. It's been 2 weeks, over 2 weeks. All of you have listened diligently. You've given your time. You've given obviously your lives outside of this court are more important. But this is a very important civic duty, and it does not go unrecognized. So we thank you very much. As the court indicated, this is my first of 2 opportunities to talk to you about this case. And in this case, there have been many witnesses who have testified. This happened 3 years ago. They provided different perspectives on what they saw, what they heard, what they did. And the majority of the witnesses were teenagers when this happened. It was a horrific event. But the main story is the same. The main story is the same. The horrific event that was etched in their minds was the same. This case is not about who did it, what happened, how it happened, when it happened, what happened. This case is about Raul Valle, the defendant, who brought a knife to 43 Laurel Glen on May 14th of 2022 and provoked a fight and stabbed 4 kids 9 times, killing 1. That's what this case is about. So what happened on May 14th of 2022? You heard testimony about this party at Lazybrook, where it was a St. Joe's party. Kids were hanging out. They were drinking. Typical high school party. Probably not the first time there's been alcohol at a high school party, right? Not that anybody's condoning it, but it happens. So there's this party. The defendant's there with his friends. He's wearing this helmet. And in come in some Shelton High School kids, Ryan Hines and Griffin Marcinzik. And because this is a St. Joe's party, not a Shelton party, they can't come in. So the defendant and Mr. Snyder and De Silva take it upon themselves to kick them out. They steal the beer from Ryan Hines. At some point in time, it gets heated. They're arguing back and forth. And at some point, it ends out into the driveway. And when it's out into the driveway, there's this agreement. I'll fight you for my beer. So Jack and Ryan square up. And just as they're squaring up, who starts the fight? The defendant starts the fight. He sucker punches him in the back of the head. And then after he sucker punches him in the back of the head and the fight goes to the ground, he takes his helmet and uses it as a weapon and slams it into Ryan's head. you heard the defendant testify. He would have you believe that that was a push, that he pushed Ryan Hines, and that he didn't hit him with the helmet. I would submit to you that if you watch that fight, you could judge for yourselves what you see in the fight. And by the way, while I'm talking about witnesses, the judge is going to give you a credibility instruction, right? You're all going to have to assess the credibility of each and every witness who testified. And if you recall during voir dire, I think I asked each and every one of you the same question. You think it's possible that somebody could get on a stand, raise their right hand, and tell the truth? And you all said yes. I also asked all of you, do you think it's entirely possible that somebody could swear to tell the truth, believe they're telling the truth, and simply be mistaken about something? And you all said, yeah, that's possible. But I also asked you, do you think it's possible somebody could get on that stand, swear to tell the truth, and look all of you in the eye and outright lie to you? So again, when you're assessing the credibility of each and every one of the witnesses who testified, that's what you have to go through. And you have to go through what they said and how does it line up with the rest of the case, right? The defendant who took the stand is also subject to that same credibility instruction. He put his credibility in issue as soon as he took that oath. The video I would submit to you tells a very different story than what the defendant testified to a couple days ago. So after this fight, they get in Jack's car and they leave Lazybrook and they go to Trumbull High School. And at some point in time, as they go to Trumbull High School, there's this basketball group chat. You heard testimony that Shelton kids were in it. You heard testimony that Ryan Hines was in it. You heard testimony that the defendant was in it. You heard the testimony that De Silva and Snyder were in it. And you also heard testimony that they wanted to fight the Shelton kids at Trumbull High School. They were there for about 20 minutes. This wasn't over. Of course, there was argument and heated emotions about what had just happened at Lazybrook, but now they want to meet up at Trumbull High School. So what does the defendant say? The defendant tells them to slide on over to Trumbull High School multiple times in the group chat. Slide right over because they want to fight. Shelton kids don't want to go to Trumbull High School. Somebody puts an address, 43 Laurel Glen, in the group chat. Come to Laurel Glen. So they go over to Laurel Glen. The defendant would have you believe that he had no idea that they were going to fight, that they were just going to another party. I would submit to you that you need to assess whether or not that's credible during your deliberations. But in any event, you heard testimony from several witnesses that the defendant wanted to go to Lazybrook or Laurel Glen to fight. He wanted to fight at Trumbull High School, and he wanted to fight over at Laurel Glen, and that's why they were going. And as a matter of fact, when they got to Laurel Glen, the defendant lets all the kids know that they're there. There's a few kids outside, more kids come outside, and at some point in time, Tyler Rich and his friends are outside. They're around the car in front of his house at 43 Laurel Glen, and there's some testimony that at first it was peaceful, some testimony that it got heated, arguing back and forth, things were being thrown. You heard testimony from Aiden King. I saw Raul sitting behind Jack Snyder, who was driving. Tyler De Silva was in the front seat. The defendant even said Aiden King's his boy. And Aiden King got up here and said, at some point in time, the defendant said, get your friends away from my car. I'm going to break a bottle over somebody's head. Again, all of these things going to what was his intent that night. So things are thrown at the car. The car was being shook by the Shelton kids. There's some testimony that things were being thrown back. Car takes off, drives up and down the street. Things thrown from the car, things being thrown at the car. At some point in time, they end up at the end of the street, close to the intersection of Farmhouse Road near 36 Laurel Glen. Now, this is 11:40 at night. You heard testimony. This is Jack Snyder's car. The defendant's already out of the car. Tyler DeSilva gets out of the car. I would submit to you that the defendant being mad, angry about what had just happened, Jack Snyder's car, happens just prior to this video starting. And that's the point when he asks him for the knife. He asked him for the knife. He said, Jack, give me the knife. Where's that knife? Give me the knife. He gets out of the car. Tyler DeSilva gets out of the car. Keenan, Dimitri, Will, Mackenzie walking away, everybody with an earshot of that conversation. You heard people testify about what they heard about the knife. How you heard Keenan Frasick, he was going insane. He was pissed off about what had just happened to the car. You heard Dimitri, he was angry about what had happened to the car. Tyler DeSilva, Jack Snyder. You heard Mackenzie say, I heard somebody asking about a knife, but I don't know exactly who it was because she's walking away, right? So we know the knife comes out at that point in time. He's angry. He arms himself with a knife at that point. But then the Shelton kids come down the street. After having just told them, get out of here, get the heck out of here. Now look, was it right that things were thrown at the car? 100% no. Was not right at all. Wasn't right that people were hitting the car, shaking the car, and people throwing things from the car at the kids or at the cars parked on the side of the street. That wasn't right either. But at that point in time, nobody called the police. They drove down the street. Could have called the police at that point. Could have said, hey, someone just damaged my car. I want them arrested for criminal mischief. They didn't do that. The defendant at that point in time thought it was very important to arm himself with a 3-inch bladed knife at that point. So the kids come down the street. You heard Tyler Rich, Charlie Connory, Ty Wood, Ricky Fiola, a few other kids go down the street. And yeah, there's things thrown at the car. They throw things back, right? But there's no physical altercation between the parties down the street. Because if there was going to be a physical altercation initiated by the Shelton kids, it would have happened right then and there, but it didn't. Right? Again, Tyler Rich running down the street. Get out of here. You guys got to get out of here. Now, you heard some testimony that somebody threw this can of WD-40 or PB Blaster back at Tyler Rich, and he's walking away. And at some point in time, he sees the defendant, and the defendant's walking towards him. So he sprays him to get him away. Ricky Fiola sees this. He's within a short distance to see this happening. At some point in time, Ricky Fiola approaches the defendant and has a conversation. And what did you hear him testify to? He said, listen, hey, man, it's really messed up what he did. He shouldn't have sprayed you with that stuff. But look, there's a lot of us, and there's only like 5 of you. You guys should probably just get out of here. And while he's having that conversation, what does Ricky Fiola see? Ricky Fiola sees the defendant holding a knife in his hand. Ricky Fiola turns around, walks back. The rest of the Shelton kids walk back to Tyler Rich's house. Again, no physical altercation down the road. Mackenzie Traficante is calling her sister, I need a ride home. At some point in time, Will, Dimitri, and Keenan get out of the car. And they don't want to be a part of anything. They want to ride home. They stay down the end of the street. Rides are being called. Will calls his girlfriend, come pick me up. I think you heard testimony from Mackenzie Traficante who said, no, Lito, just stay down here. Stay with me. Come home with me. That's not what he wanted to do. Because Ryan Hines, who he had just sucker punched in the head earlier that night and helmeted back at Lazybrook, who was now at this party, now he wanted to go back and face those kids. But he wasn't going back just him. He was going back with a knife. Because who else goes back to a house, right? I mean, you heard testimony when he was in the car with a bunch of other people, and the car was being shook and rocked and thrown at, that he was panicked, he was frightened, he was scared, he was terrified. If you're all those things, why are we not staying down the road? Why are we not waiting for Mackenzie's sisters to come pick us up? Why are we not calling somebody to come pick us up? Because he wasn't scared, terrified, panicked. It's just simply not, that's not the case. He was mad, he was pissed, he was angry, and he had a knife. So they wanted to go back and go and confront those kids. Now there's some testimony that Tyler wanted to go talk about the damage. and he knows Tyler Rich. Maybe he could work something out. But the bottom line is, he's the one that was going ballistic about the car. Yeah, sure, Tyler and Snyder were angry, but he's going crazy, and he's the one that arms himself with a knife. So he gets back in that car. He makes the willful decision, right, to get back in that car, armed with a knife, and go back to the very house he was told to leave. But he would have you believe he was panicked, scared, frightened, all of those things. So Jack pulls up to the 43 Laurel Glen. The defendant and Mr. De Silva get out. You've heard testimony from several witnesses that Tyler's on the left, the defendant's on the right. They move on to property. They were told to leave, so now they're trespassing. Some kids were outside. Got a little bigger when people heard, oh, people are here. You heard Tyler Rich say, I told him to get the F out of my property. The defendant walks up. Ryan Hines, Faison Teel, Tommy Connory somewhere behind them, but closer in proximity to the defendant. Ty Wood there is also there. And you heard Tyler Rich say, I was yelling at these kids, get the hell off my property. I looked out of the corner of my eye and I saw Raul cock his arm like he was going to punch Ty Wood. And that's when I just hauled off and cracked him in the face. And it was on. So I would submit to you, if the defendant walked on the property, confronted those kids, and started to throw a punch or pretend like he was going to throw a punch, he was the initial aggressor in the altercation by coming back, by approaching those kids, and by cocking his arm. He was the initial aggressor. He provoked the fight and started the fight. He gets hit, it's on. All right, now I can claim self-defense. Now I can take this knife out that I have in my pocket while I'm on the ground, open it up, right? All intentional conduct, and start stabbing kids, right? You heard him testify, I was flailing my arms. I would submit to you, if you look at any of the injuries on these kids from 3 years ago, those are deliberate stab wounds. Those are not flailing slash marks. Stab wounds. So he stabs Ryan Hines 3 times. He stabs Faison Teel in the arm. Again, upper, right? Left arm here. Hines up in the chest as he's working his way down. And Tommy Connory, you heard testimony from Tommy Connory, who comes over and he's trying to push him away. And he's on the ground. The defendant's on the ground, and he comes right after him and starts stabbing him in the leg 4 times. Deliberate. Again, what was his intent? This wasn't self-defense. He went into that fight already armed. His response to this fight was unreasonable when you look at it in totality. It was a fist fight that escalated by his doing because he was the only one there with a weapon. At some point in time, the defendant goes back to the car that's waiting for him. He would have you believe he was chased. I would suggest to you that the video shows a different story. But nevertheless, he's back at the car, looks back, and wants to run back in. He purposefully runs back in with the knife. And you hear Charlie Connory yelling, he's got a knife, he's got a knife, he's got a knife. And there's another person there yelling, get out of here, bro. Because again, the Shelton kids didn't want them there. There was a communication to leave. Again, all of these things could have been prevented. This is Jimmy McGrath just before he gets stabbed at the end of the fight. He's not engaging the defendant, but he would have you believe that he or somebody else was so that he can cloak himself with self-defense or defense of third parties. He had a duty to retreat and not even go after Jimmy McGrath. He was unarmed and he did nothing wrong. And even if you believe from the evidence that Jimmy was involved somewhere in the fight, somewhere, which there's been no evidence of that, but even if that's what you can infer from the video, I would submit to you that self-defense is not retaliatory. It's defensive. You can't come back and stab somebody just because you're mad. And that's exactly what happened here. He came back from the car. He ran back at people who were already, the fight was already done. Tyler De Silva clearly in the road. The fight was over. Kids were screaming back and forth. Tyler DeSilva even said the fight was over at that point. You hear, "Get out of here, bro." And at the very end of the video, you see Jimmy McGrath step back like this to try to avoid the fight, the stab wound. The deliberate stab wound in his chest. He didn't stab him in the foot. He didn't stab him in the lower leg. He stabbed him right in the chest. What was his intent when he did that? When that happens, you hear Jimmy McGrath yell, "I've been stabbed," and he collapses. He collapses.
Yes, sir! Let's go, nigga!
So he unnecessarily stabs Jimmy, right? You're going to hear an instruction about intent, right? And I'm sure the defense attorney's going to get up here and argue, he didn't wake up that morning and want to kill anybody or stab anybody. It's not what intent's about. Intent can be formed in an instant. It can be formed within a moment. I would submit to you at the beginning of that fight that was not on video, as soon as he got hit, he informed the intent, the specific intent to stab people and cause serious physical injury, right? He went back to the car and he informed the same intent when he turned around and saw Jimmy. "I'm going to stab this kid and get out of here." Why else would you stab him in the heart? You stab him right in the chest, piercing his heart. After he gets back to the car, he tells you that, or Snyder indicates, gets back in the car and he says, "I just stabbed like 4 kids." So he knew how many kids he stabbed. He knew how many kids he stabbed. But he knew he stabbed kids. He got on the stand here. I don't know if I stabbed anybody, right? We heard that testimony. I don't know if I stabbed. I was the only one with the knife, but he couldn't even say it. But he said it that night. He knew he stabbed kids that night. So we know he did it. They go back down the road. No, before we get there, they take off. DeSilva jumps in the car. They take off. They take a left. They go down Adams Drive. They're at the cul-de-sac. He says, "Stop the car," and throws the knife into the woods. Why? Consciousness of guilt. They'll hear an instruction about consciousness of guilt. Why are we getting rid of the weapon, right? Gets back in the car. Go, go, go. They go back down to 36 Laurel Glen. Mackenzie's sister's there. He tells Jack and Tyler, "I'm going home with Mackenzie." Jumps in the car with Mackenzie, and the cars leave the area. Mackenzie drops off Keenan and Dimitri, and then they subsequently drop off the defendant at his house. Mackenzie was mad, right? She told you, "I was pissed. I didn't want to be there. I was mad at him. They were going there to fight. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be involved in any of that." They were all going there to fight that night. But after the defendant gets dropped off, you hear about the text messages that go back and forth between Mackenzie, who was his then girlfriend, and Raul. And he's saying things like, "I can't text anything. I wasn't there. You know I wasn't there. Nothing is happening. Don't text me. I'm going to Florida. I didn't do anything." That was text messaging. They want to put anything in writing. You also hear that he spoke to Tyler DeSilva on the phone. And when he spoke to Tyler DeSilva on the phone, he says, "Dude, I fucked up. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do." Because he knew what he was doing that night, and now he's having buyer's remorse. So again, what was his intent, right? You guys are really going to be able to examine what his intent was. And the judge is going to give you an instruction such as, there's no particular length of time necessary for the defendant to have formed the intent. Intent can be formed in an instant. It can be created in a moment. Intent may be, and usually is, inferred from the circumstances of the crime, since no witness can come into court and testify that they looked into a defendant's mind and saw what his intention was. You can look at the number of wounds inflicted, the location of those wounds on each person's body, the type of instrument used to cause those wounds, and his conduct during all of this. I would submit you could even look at the conduct from Lazybrook. What was his conduct during that fight, and for what his intent was later on that night. In this case, the state contends that there were 9 stab wounds inflicted by this defendant on 4 different individuals. They were stab wounds, not slashes. I would suggest to you that a person who stabs multiple people multiple times in areas of the body that would cause serious physical injury and death intended to cause those serious physical injuries and death. There's no other rational conclusion. So that's what this case is about. The defendant was enraged about what had happened earlier. He armed himself and he returned to a house to face those kids with the intent to stab somebody. He could have waited down the street. They could have called the cops. He didn't have to go back. He did. He intentionally went back. It doesn't make sense when someone says, I was very scared, frightened, and panicked, to go put yourself back in that situation. It makes zero sense. And because of his conduct, 3 people are going to have to live with scars for the rest of their lives, both mentally and physically. And James McGrath lost his life unnecessarily. And the ripple effects that that's caused his family. The credible evidence in this case shows that on that day, he intentionally caused physical injury to Faison Teel. He caused that injury by stabbing him in the upper arm with a dangerous instrument. With regards to Tommy Connory, the credible evidence shows that he intentionally caused serious physical injury to Tommy Connory. He specifically intended to cause that injury by stabbing him 4 times in the upper leg, causing deep stab wounds. You heard testimony from his doctor. She was concerned about compartment syndrome and him losing his leg. Deep stab wounds. I mean, deep stab wounds. These are not flailing slash marks. These are deep stab wounds. Again, the manner in which the wounds are the wounds are inflicted. It's not corroborative of slash marks. And he did that with a dangerous instrument. With regards to Ryan Hines, he intentionally caused serious physical injury to Ryan Hines. He had the specific intent to cause that injury by stabbing him 3 times in the upper torso, causing a collapsed lung and other injuries to his lower abdomen and hip area. And he did that again with the dangerous instrument. And with regards to Jimmy McGrath, he formed the specific intent to kill Jimmy McGrath at the moment he came back from that car, turned to him, and plunged the knife into his heart. He didn't slash at Jimmy McGrath. He plunged the knife into his heart, through his rib cage, and through his heart, and the poor kid bled to death right there on the front lawn. The judge is going to give you an instruction on sympathy. You need to file that instruction. And I apologize for getting a little choked up here, because I have a son as well. And I can't imagine what it feels like to have that happen. And I hope no one else ever has to. I hope no one else has to go through this ever. It's terrible. I apologize for taking a moment. But again, the judge is going to give you an instruction on sympathy, so please follow that instruction on sympathy. But we are confident that after you review all of this evidence, you will find the state has proved each and every element of the charge beyond a reasonable doubt. You'll find that the defendant intentionally caused the death of Jimmy McGrath, intentionally caused assault in the first degree to both Ryan Hines and Tommy Connory, and intentionally caused physical injury to Faison Teel with a dangerous instrument. We're confident after you review all the evidence, you'll determine this was not self-defense. He provoked this fight. He was the initial aggressor, and he had a duty to retreat and he should have. The state urges you at this time, well, after you deliberate the evidence, we urge you that you find the defendant guilty of all the crimes charged in the information. The defense will now have an opportunity to speak with you, and when he's finished, I'll come back and speak with you again. Thank you.